So the purpose of this is to have a discussion about how to fund your project. This is how we are going to do. Each of us will have a brief introduction and we'll go over some of the slides. If you have any questions or you want to say anything, feel free to put in the chat. And if the speaker forgets to respond, maybe one of the person will screen and stop the speaker. So let me start. My name is Yung-Hsiang. I'm a professor in electrical and computer engineering at Purdue. I'm also the director for John Mattison Entrepreneurship Center. I work with a lot of students on many different projects. I write proposals. So I think this is an opportunity for us to discuss.
Hi, I'm Abhinav, and I'm a third-year PhD student here at Purdue. I work with Dr. Liu. And my research is mainly focused on low-power computer vision. And based on that, I have written, I was a part of 2 proposals. And so I'm here to talk about my experience.
Hey guys, I'm Caleb. I'm also a PhD student with Professor Liu, but I'm a second-year PhD student. My research, like Abhinav, is also in the area of low-power computer vision. I've done also 2 proposals with Professor Liu. So I'm here to talk about that.
Great, and I'm Professor Thiruvathukal from Goel, University of Chicago, and I've worked on a lot of proposals, National Science Foundation, National Endowment for the Humanities, and I even had a Defense Department grant through the SBIR program many years ago. And I, like many, I have what I like to call a mixed rate of success. So you have to be willing to keep trying when it comes to proposals. I think that's going to be a theme of our presentation today.
Okay, so thank you. Again, feel free to jump in if you want to share with any your thoughts. So the first question is, why do you need to write a proposal? Okay, the simple answer is you want to solve a problem and you need resources, such as money. Before we talk about proposals, I do want to mention a few things, my observation about how to be successful. I have discovered there are only 2 questions you need to ask. The first question is, what do you want to do? The second question is, what can you contribute? So the first question is, what are you going to do in the rest of your life, right? You have to figure out that. And related question is, are you going to make the world a bit better place? If you can answer these 2 questions, you are probably on a path to success. Unfortunately, most people don't ask those questions. Most people choose their life just because they get a job offer. And whoever given a first job offer, that determines the rest of their lives. And it turns out statistics show that 80% really people hate their job, but they will stay because they don't know what are the other options. One thing we want to accomplish in this discussion is we want to tell you there are different options. We want to help you become successful. That's what we do in universities. We hope students become successful. And maybe one day you will donate to Purdue or Loyola. I already have a former student donated to Purdue because they think Purdue has been very helpful for their own career. And if you are interested in going to graduate school, you are actually writing a proposal because you need to write something called statement of purpose. So I have a few slides about that. You need to think about how you are going to convince the university to give you admission, and in some cases even give you funding, such as fellowship or TA-ship or RA-ship. Therefore, you need to write proposals. If you want to go to graduate school, you need to know how to write proposals. Up to this point, any questions, concerns, or anyone want to say anything? Okay, then I'll go on. I think there's some big noise there. If you're not talking, please mute.
Maybe that could be coming from me. I'll mute.
When you apply for graduate school, you need to write something called statement of purpose. You need to explain what's your purpose. What do you want to accomplish? And I will show you some examples later on. Why do you want to do this? How do you want to do it? And why are you qualified? You have to answer those questions to convince the universities you are great and you will be successful. You need to provide evidence. for example, you say, I have taken this course, I'm one of the top in the course, I've done this competition, I win this competition, I have a paper, some evidence to demonstrate that you can accomplish what you want to accomplish. Please stay technical. Don't tell personal stories. I will show you an example in a moment. And very often you also want to say, what's the purpose, right? If everything you want to say is, I want to do this, I want to do that, I want to do this, at the end, university is a place to create talent, and universities also want talent to make the society a better place. So if everything you think about is yourself, then sometimes universities may not say, I'm not sure this person will actually become a contributor to a society. There's some noise. If you are not talking, please mute. You want to talk, please speak.
Let's get someone else.
Okay. A common mistake I've seen in many graduate school application is the following. I took this class, I love it, I want to study more, and that's it. They don't say anything more. They don't say anything about the class. They don't say how you're going to do. I fill the rest of a statement with irrelevant things. I've seen many graduate applications like that. So let me give you an example. Okay, so please sit tight and don't laugh off your chair. All right, when I was 10 years old, someone broke into the computer of my grandfather's business. My grandfather lost a lot of money. Since then, I want to become an expert in computer security. My grandfather is the person I respect the most in my entire life. My grandfather built a company from nothing to a scale of 250 employees. The company sold car parts and has offices in 6 cities. I'm really proud of my grandfather. My grandfather grew up in a poor family, and so on and so on. Can anybody see what's good or bad about this statement of purpose? What is your purpose? Actually, this is not exactly, but I've seen statement of purpose like this. The rest of the statement of purpose is about the story of grandfather. It's not about computer security. I was hoping to see something about computer security. I also discovered that when we talk about getting research money, we should admit a grandfather to a PhD program. I think that's a good point. Even though this discussion is about research funding, but you actually should not think about research funding. This is what I mean by that. You need to ask yourself, what's the problem I want to solve? And who cares if I solve the problem? Who can I help? And who should I work with? You have to answer those questions before you start thinking about money. As the director of the John Martinson Entrepreneurship Center, I have the opportunity talking to people. They just ask for money and they don't know why. They ask, how am I going to spend the money? How do I get the money? How can I take money from other people? And they believe the world is perfect if they have more money. In fact, this was a conversation I have had with several different students in different occasions. They came to me and say, give me money. And I said, what do you want to do? And they say, I want $15,000. And I said, how are you going to spend the money? And the person said, I want $15,000. I think at the end, the student, this is actually multiple cases like this, they did not understand why I asked those questions. Another group of students asked me for some amount of money, and I asked how they are going to spend. They want to build something for a possibly commercial product. Based on their description, I said, you need a lot of money. They said, no, just give me $10,000. I said, I don't think $10,000 will be sufficient. I think you need at least $100,000, probably $1 million. But they don't know how to answer the question because they have not thought through the problem. So don't ask for money before you know the rest of the problem. Okay, there are 2 very interesting books from the business side. One is called So What, Who Cares, Why You? Another book is called The Business Model You. I encourage everybody to read these 2 books to answer some of the questions. Okay, so George, I think this is the slide you put here, right? Okay, you want to talk?
Yeah, sure. I was mostly just being quiet because we have quite a few cicadas here in Chicago right now, so it's making a lot of noise in my I hope everyone can hear me well. So
yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, I think one of the big things that you know, and this is something that's true of all proposal writing, not just from you know, not just from you know, like business or research proposals, is, you know, I think that a lot of times when we start working on problems, we tend to be thinking about ourselves and our own problems. And I especially want to point out that, you know, like early in my career, like I used to be really interested in language design, and I was like, oh, we should really make another programming language, you know, to, you know, that will, you know, be highly secure and, you know, solve all the problems that are happening in systems. And, but then I realized that it's going to be very hard to do something like that without a lot of people, and without a lot of people actually using the language. So it's very difficult to just be motivated only by personal interests. And really then when I thought about it, I was only interested in writing a compiler. I wasn't really interested in making a language that anyone was going to use, let alone have to support actual customers for the language. So always I think people should think about, you know, are you just solving like a personal problem, or are you actually looking at how to solve problems that are of greater world or even like greater community interest is a better way of putting it. And, you know, I think that this has always been an important thing to do, but we're especially living in times now where we need to look more broadly at the problem we're trying to solve and ask ourselves whether there's going to be any impact for it. Okay, and that when I say impact, I don't just mean citation impact. I also mean, like, will somebody be interested in this problem? In fact, citations might be one of the least motivating things when it comes to solving problems. You really want to focus on, like, being able to, you know, get other recognition for your work as well.
Right, thank you. So that always go to the question is, what problem are you solving? If you can figure that out, that question, you are really on the path of success. So the next few slides is to show you there are a lot of opportunities you may not be aware to solve the problems you may care about. For example, I just did a little bit web search to search a few possibilities. Let's imagine you really care about the poverty problem and the homelessness problem in the United States. There are actually foundations you can request funding to help you solve the problem or solve the problem in your community. There's another foundation, they care about things like mobility, justice reform, and violence prevention, and so on. So if you encounter a problem, you can get resources from foundations like that to solve problems. Another example is, let's say you want to reduce traffic congestion. Maybe you want to write a proposal to the city department of transportation and say, I have a great idea, I want to solve the problem. So you always focus on what problem you want to solve. Another possibility is you want to think very differently from other people. Imagine you are in an environment where water is needed. The typical reaction of most people is to say, let me go to carry some water, or maybe hire some people to carry water. But can you actually solve the problem in a bigger scale, such as building pipelines? Of course, building pipeline takes a lot of resources, takes people, takes material, takes machine, and you do need funding to do that. Another possibility is you say, I think Purdue should have a new degree program. Then Purdue will ask you, who will you serve? Who will be the students, and what resources you need. So that's another example of a proposal. Therefore, to do many things, we need to write proposals. And in particular, in terms of funding, to raise money for the project. Any questions or comments so far? I want to mention there are many different types of proposals, and you have to understand where you stand in the spectrum. This is an example. Let's say a foundation asks you to write a proposal how to eliminate poverty. So that's a very complex problem. Where do you want to start? Maybe you may say, I want to improve education. Maybe I want to improve transportation so people can find better jobs. Maybe I want to improve the health system so people don't get sick, because people get sick, they cannot work. So there are many, many different angles. Maybe you want to reduce crime and so on. There are many different angles. That's one type of proposals you may write. Another type of proposal is the funding organization has already identified the angle they want to do. Solve the problem is they want to improve education. So if you want to improve transportation, that's not in the scope. You have to understand what they are asking. In this case, they focus on education and they want you to design courses for poor families. So if you do write a proposal to this sponsor, you have to understand what they are looking for. Then maybe they can go even further to be more specific. They want you to create online courses on the topic of personal finance. So this is even more specific. They want you to deliver the material in an online format, and they want you to give the topic is about personal finance. You can go even further. Maybe the sponsor want you to manage the course. They don't want you to create the content, but want you to manage your course, maybe handle enrollment or certificate and so on. Before you get into writing a proposal, you have to understand what the sponsors are looking for and whether you have a capability to meet what they need. For students, in particular, if you are a US citizen, in this particular case, you can write something called the National Science Foundation Graduate Research Fellowship. You can search and find a lot of details. This is a program that will support students to pursue graduate degree, usually doctoral degree in the United States. There are many other programs like this. For United States, there's Department of Energy also has a graduate fellowship program. In addition to government, usually government programs have restrictions on citizenship. But there are many other programs by private companies. They may not have the restriction of citizenship. For example, IBM has their PhD fellowship award. And then Google also has a PhD fellowship program. And Microsoft has PhD fellowship program. There are many, many fellowship programs. So before you start going to a professor and say, give me money, you may want to check out whether it's possible for you to apply for these programs. Because if you do, then first it gives you money. Second, it also is an honor. Depends on, many of the programs are very selective. So if you are selected, then it's also something good for your resume. Okay, I think Caleb put something here. No, George put something here. You want to say something?
Yes, I do actually. So one of the things to keep in mind with solicitations is that they're sometimes written in ways that might seem very general, but then when you actually find out what's happening, the actual criteria are surprisingly specific. So NSF proposals, especially, I'm talking about the general proposals for research funding, often are written in this very general, almost vague language. But then like having served as a panelist, when you get into the panel, you find out, oh, they really wanted something very specific, but they just did not describe it properly. And so I think it's very important to realize that you may have to, I think we have a slide on this later, but it sometimes is important to seek clarification from people involved with the funding opportunity to make sure that you understand to the best of your ability what they're looking for. And
right.
Yung-Hsiang and I have a lot of experience with this, as we just submitted a response to this cybersecurity education thing, and we still don't really know what they're looking for, but we're going to do our best to, hopefully be selected this time. Okay, so just giving you that as an example.
Okay, yes, we do have a slide about this. In most cases, you can actually go to a funding agency or the companies and so on and ask them, what are you looking for? In many cases, they actually want to have a discussion because it's not to their benefit if the proposals are not solving the problem they want to solve. They want to see proposals solving the problem they want to solve. Therefore, they are willing to communicate with you so that your proposals are solving the problem they want to solve. Caleb, I think next time is your turn.
Okay, cool. We've got two professors here that obviously have been writing proposals much longer than I have, so I'm not going to take too long here. But what I want to share with you guys is another side of the coin. Obviously, everyone knows that, oh, you get money when you write a proposal, right? But I think there's a lot more personal development that you get out of writing a proposal, and that's what I want to talk about. So obviously, writing a proposal is not easy, right? You're deciding, okay, do I want to write a proposal? Because it takes a lot of time, right? It's like 40 hours a day of work. And then, you don't even know if you're going to get the money, right? So it's very easy for, I think, a student especially to look at this and say, well, it doesn't seem to really affect me all that much. Do I really want to put all of this effort in or not? And I think the answer to that is yes. I absolutely do think it's a great idea to work on a proposal, if you get the chance to work on a proposal, because of all of this personal development that you get. Now, you might be wondering, okay, well, it sounds great, but what can I get out of writing a proposal that I can't get out of writing a paper, right? A lot of undergraduate researchers are going to be writing papers, and you're like, well, why don't I just do that and not a proposal? Well, sure, a proposal has some similarities to a paper, right? You have to do a literature review, but the difference is for a proposal, you have to do a very extensive literature review, because when you're writing a proposal, often these proposals are not just, oh, I'm going to do one quick project with it and call it a day. That's the scope of a research paper, not a proposal. A proposal usually encompasses multiple research papers. It's supposed to fund multiple papers. So you're going to have to actually do a lot more literature review. So as a result of doing that literature review, you become a lot more of an expert in your field, because you understand more broadly what other people are doing about the problem that you are trying to solve. It's obviously a more challenging problem presentation, because you have to be able to define the big problem and then break it up into a lot of small problems that are solvable with a few papers, right? You have to be able to present this. You can't just say, well, the problem is, there is, like Professor Liu said, there's poverty. And so we're just gonna solve the problem, right? You have to be able to break the problem down, make it manageable, so that the people reviewing your proposal see, okay, it looks like you do know what you're talking about. But it goes further than that. It's not just paper, but harder. It's not just that. You go further, right? You think bigger. I think Abhinav will talk about this in a second, so I'm not really going to talk too much about this. But you're thinking beyond the scope of one paper. You're thinking further down the road. You're saying, well, okay, if I can come up with a problem that can be solved this way, can I build off of that and do this, and then do this, and then do this, right? Especially for me as a PhD student, and for those of you that are thinking about doing a PhD, it's great to actually have some idea of what your dissertation's kind of going to look like as you come in. So writing a proposal forces you to do that, which is my case. I wrote a proposal basically talking about the sort of research I wanted to do for my dissertation. So it was good. I could plan this out in advance. It forces you to develop those ideas, right? You can't just say, well, this would be cool, the end. You have to go, well, could I actually solve this? Is it possible, feasible, based on what I know, to solve this? So you, again, goes back to that literature review. You become that expert. You now understand what is probably achievable. You don't know for sure, it's research, right? But you can be a lot more educated about what you might be able to do and what you might not. The last thing I think is actually really, really big for me. Actually, Professor Liu, could you jump back to the previous slide? This is really, really good practice for industry R&D, because if you want to go and do research for industry, you don't even want to be a professor. You want to go work for somewhere like Southwest Research Institute or a lab. There's a really good chance they're going to ask you to help them write proposals. My intern at one of my previous internships, one of the hiring managers says, one of the biggest things that we look for but can't find are graduates of graduate school that know how to write proposals. He said it's most grad students, they graduate with a PhD, but they don't know how to write a proposal. And he said, we need people that can write proposals. So this is obviously good for your resume. Okay, Professor Liu, next slide, please. Okay, so obviously this kind of sounds like I'm trying to give you a Tom Sawyer experience here, right? Where I'm saying, oh, no, it's really hard work, but it's not every day that you get to do this hard work, right? It's not, okay, it does sound like that, but I promise you that this is actually a very good experience. Most professors don't let their students write proposals. To my knowledge, a lot of professors don't do that. They're like, it's way easier if I write it, because if the student writes it, they might mess it up, right? But if you have a professor that's willing to let you write a proposal, you should absolutely go for it. This is really, really good personal experience. Your professor isn't going to get anything out of it if your proposal gets rejected. So all of this is basically them saying, we are letting you have this personal experience development, right? So if they ask you, would you like to write a proposal? I would definitely say yes. And that's all I got. Thanks, guys. If you have questions, you can post them in chat.
Hi, just to introduce myself, I'm Abhinav, and I'm going to talk to you about how writing a proposal or getting a research grant or just raising money for your project is important for grad school, how it gets you through grad school. A big difference between the undergraduate degree and a graduate degree is, I think, in the degree requirements. As an undergraduate, your main focus is to take courses. You take a bunch of courses, your required courses, your electives, and once you hit a set number of courses, you pass all of them, you would be awarded a degree. In grad school, you do take a few courses, not as many, but there is a big research component involved in it. You have multiple exams along the way when you have to showcase your research progress. You have to show that your research contributions are significant, and only if you can show that, you will move on to the next stage of grad school. So here on the slide, there is like a general timeline of what a graduate degree looks like. So once you step into grad school, you have approximately maybe 1 year or 2 years before you have your first big exam. That's the qualifying exam. Your qualifying exam is basically a quiz that tests you on the breadth of knowledge in the field that you're working in. So for example, I'm a CompE student. My research focus is on computer vision. My qualifying exams were on operating systems, computer networks, and image processing. So I had to show that I had enough breadth in the different verticals of ECE so that I can perform good research. Once you finish your qualifying exam, then you start focusing more on research and less on coursework. And then towards your third year or your fourth year, you have another big exam. That's your preliminary exam. Your preliminary exam is usually an oral exam where you will discuss your research so far with your thesis committee. Here, they're going to ask you really challenging questions about your research methodology, about your research, to just check if your research is significant and is it in the right direction. Once you pass this exam, then you're a PhD candidate. And then you have 3 or 4 semesters of really focused research and your thesis writing. And then you have your really big exam, that's your final exam or your thesis defense, where you would present your research to a panel of experts. And these experts are trying to dissect your thesis to make sure that what you've done is novel, it is useful, and it is a significant contribution in the field that you're working on. Once you pass your final exam, only then you could get your degree. So a big difference between the undergraduate degree and the graduate degree is that you need to be able to do research in order to graduate. Next slide, please. Just switching up the gears a bit. So why do we need research grants? Like, I just need to do research, right? The thing is, doing research is super expensive. You need to pay for a lot of things that will allow you to do research. One such thing is computers. Computers, like the computers that we use in our lab, cost like $10,000 each. And we need multiple such computers in order to like train our neural networks and so on. You also sometimes need to pay for equipment. It could be like sensors, tools, some sort of devices that you need. You need some proprietary software. Like in my case, I need a lot of embedded systems and boards and chips. You also need to pay for infrastructure. You need to pay for the electricity in the labs. You need to pay for AC, heat, building maintenance, water, and all of that also needs to be paid for. Sometimes you also need to travel. You need to, once you've done research, you need to possibly collaborate with someone else. You also might want to present your research at conferences so that you can get feedback from experts in the field. And obviously something that's really close to my heart is grad student salary. This would possibly help grad students pay for rent and buy food, possibly, but Yeah, but research grants help even funding grad students so that they can focus on doing research. Next slide, please. So when you put these two together, you need research to graduate as a grad student. You need grants to do research. So indirectly, you do need these grants in order to graduate. Also, if you have a research grant as a grad student, you could possibly support yourself financially through the research grant, which is great because you can focus all your time and all your energy in doing research, and doing research that would help you graduate. There are multiple ways that you could support yourself in grad school. You could be a teaching assistant or an administrative assistant, or you could have a job elsewhere. But all of these things have time commitments that you would have to spend X amount of hours doing something else other than your research. Next slide, please. So coming back to the important question, why should students write proposals? Isn't this like the professor's job? Like professors should be able to get research funding for the lab so that everyone in the lab could do research. I think it's really important, given the opportunity for students to think about proposals or write proposals, because you have to think about these really important questions. Sometimes when doing research, you just get lost in the technical details or the technical nitty-gritties of what you're working on, that you lose sight of the big picture goal. A really important question that you have to answer while writing a proposal is, what are the applications of your research? Who's going to use it? Why are they going to use it? How are they going to use it? And why will anyone give you money for your research? Answering that question really gives you perspective of what research you are doing and what research you should be doing. Sometimes the scope of research projects becomes really wide. I might have like 10 problems that I'm really passionate about, and I'm looking to solve all 10 problems. But it's really important to limit the scope of your research project so that it is feasible and it's something that you can do. And also, while setting the scope of your research project, you can also establish a success criteria for your research. Success criteria is really, really important because that's how you can measure when your research is done, or when your research is successful, when your results are good enough for your applications, and when your results are good enough for your sponsors' applications. And also, establishing a success criteria gives you a benchmark to tell you how well you are performing. And this benchmark is also going to be required by a thesis committee when they're going to evaluate whether your research has made significant contributions in the area or not. As a matter of fact, all these questions need to be answered as part of your thesis. So the earlier you start writing a proposal, the earlier you have an opportunity to think about your thesis, and you can start structuring your PhD or your research in such a way that you won't have problems structuring your thesis later on. So that's it from me. If you have any questions, please let me know.
Anybody have anything you want to discuss?
I had posted just a couple of comments in the chat that I want to mention because I think they're very important. Follow on to, first of all, Caleb and Abhinav have again just shown us why they're such great PhD students. But I want to say that, like, one of the things that I always thought about is, as a student, is, you know, we all want to say we came from a great lab. And if you look at like a lot of the top universities, right? Like Stanford, you have all these people now have been giving money back to their, you know, universities and labs, right? It's not just Stanford, a lot of universities. So I think it's really important, like with these proposals, you know, it takes so long, you may even have to submit it more than once, which we're finding out because Caleb and Abhinav wrote some beautiful proposals. And realistically speaking, it's probably going to be used to fund someone else in the future. And you know, as a student, I always wanted my advisor and any new students that came to be funded, even though, you know, I was not lucky to get something like that funded. So I think it's really important to think about the bigger picture. And I really like how Abhinav mentioned that this actually has a nice double effect, a twofer, as we like to call it in Chicago. Two for the price of one, you know? So you're also getting like all this extra legwork done for your dissertation, because a lot of times you can either build some of the text from existing papers, or you can take those existing words from your proposal and reuse them in like your final dissertation defense. So it has like a lot of benefits and just prepares you for the future.
Sounds great. Anyone else want to say anything? Okay, so we are going to get a little bit more technical in the coming slides. As I mentioned at the beginning, you have to think about the problem you want to solve. There are many different kinds of problems you want to solve. being able to explain the problem you want to solve is the first step, right? Do you want to explore space? Do you want to eliminate disease? Do you want to protect environment or poverty, save lives, improve education? You have to first think about what problem you want to solve. Then you need to think about where you find the resources, because different funding agencies or different sponsors, different foundations, they have their own specialty. Some foundations will support projects that will, let's say, solving education problem, but they will not help you to improve traffic congestion. Some other foundations or funding agencies may want to help you solve the most difficult machine learning problem, but they are not interested in this particular program. They are not interested in improving education. So you have to first decide what problem you want to solve, and then find the proper sources of funding. So here I have just a few examples. There's a place called grants.gov. You can search. They actually have many opportunities. They have a wide range of possibility, from some very open-ended problems to something very specific. You almost become a contractor for government. Another example is the Gates Foundation. They want to fight poverty in the United States. That's another example. So there are some more recent examples, such as Facebook. In early summer, they have a call for proposals about ethics in AI research or agent-based user interaction to fix integrity and privacy. So if you are working on things related to privacy, this may be a good opportunity for you. You have to look for the opportunity. Facebook will not come to you and say, please write the proposal. You have to look for it. Cisco, of course, they are looking for things related to their core business, something related to maybe network and so on. So you have to think about where your research projects will fit. This is also an opportunity for you to engage with different industry sponsors. In many cases, if they select your proposal, you have a very good chance to find an intern position there, and maybe later on a regular position. This is a Google research. They have, as you can see, they have many different type of problems. They want to solve problems in artificial intelligence, cloud computing, energy efficiency in computing, and many others. This is Sony. They have a program as well, and this is example of some of the problems they want to solve. They may want to solve problems in music processing. They may want to solve problems in robotics, and so on. So there are many of them. So still go back to the question is, what problem do you want to solve? And then you want to start looking for opportunities. Should you go to Sony, or you go to Amazon, or you go to National Science Foundation, or you go to Gates Foundation? You need to think about the problem you want to solve. For the people in this research team, over the summer, we went through an exercise called Research Model Canvas. If you know something called Business Model Canvas, this is a similar concept. We identify several key questions your research project need to answer. For example, what's the problem? What's the innovation? What's the contribution? Who are in your team? What resources you need? Now let's talk about how to write a proposal. The first thing you have to do is you have to make sure the sponsor cares about what you want to do. If it's not a good match, then you are totally wasting time. So you have to say why they should do something, they should pay attention to you. Then the second is you need to explain, if you're successful, who cares? Will the company get a patent out of this? Will the company get a product? Will the government see improvement in society? Will you reduce disease or something? You have to explain different impact of your work. For example, maybe you are designing a very good sensor. All your research is about sensor, but maybe the purpose of your sensor is to improve air quality. So you have to explain what's the purpose of your work. You can spend all your time talking about sensor, but if you don't talk about the purpose, then people will say, why do I care? Obviously, you have to come up with a solution, right? It's a proposal solution, and you have to explain how is that different from existing solutions. That's what Caleb mentioned. You have to do very extensive literature survey to understand what has been done. You need to explain how you are going to evaluate, what are the metrics you will define success. Your team will be important. Your team's qualification will be important. If you are in a research team, your team's prior publication, prior patent, and so on will be important. Sometimes you will have to think about what are the resources. For example, if you don't have so many computers, we work with George and use a computer in Argonne National Lab. So that's a very precious resource for us to use for large scale computing. I'll talk about budgeting in a moment. You have to know how much money you need, and the amount of money you ask for need to be comparable to the amount of work you want to do. If you ask too much money or you ask too little money, you will not be successful. A common mistake among many students is what we call not invented here mentality. Many students, and it's not students' fault, it's to a great extent it's professors' fault. We do the same thing over and over again for the purpose of education. So if you think about, you take a course, maybe you build another binary tree, you build another linked list. How many of you have to build binary trees? There are millions of people building binary tree. Why do you build another binary tree? Well, that's for education purpose. But you shouldn't go to a proposal and say, since I have not done it, I want to do it. That's not a good way to justify the work. You have to say, since nobody in the world has done it, I'm going to do it. You have to put the bar very high, not from your viewpoint, but from the whole research community's viewpoint. So don't get into this called the not invented here thinking is, I haven't done it, so I want to do it. That's not a good way to write a proposal. You have to understand who has done the work in this field and how your work is different from theirs. George, I think you had this slide. So let's stop here and see whether there's any questions or discussion.
Yeah, you mean this is my slide or the next slide?
I think this is your slide.
Oh, it could be. Yeah, actually, well, I did some edits to kind of, but yeah, I'd like to go through this. But if there are any questions, let's take those first. Just give everyone a minute to mentally pause and understand what we've said. So, are there any questions? Okay, I'll keep going then. Yes, so I think that, and by the way, when I say most failed proposals here, I want to point out that we all have had failed proposals. I mean, Yung-Hsiang has given a beautiful discussion during the summer about how if you can't handle failure, just don't even bother, because you're going to be very disappointed. And failure is a step towards success. And I just want to say that, like, each time you even resubmit a proposal, the chances improve. They've done actual metrics on this. And you get to almost 35 to 40% chance of acceptance if you resubmit a revised proposal a third time. So somebody needs to go mute, maybe. Okay. So basically, these are the main issues that we have. Some of these have already been discussed at some level of detail. So the first one is not understanding the needs of the sponsors. So a great amount of time has to be spent on really understanding the solicitation that is, or what's often called an RFP, request for proposals document. You may spend like hours trying to figure out what they want and how your research relates to it. The next thing is not having a proper framing of the problem and not articulating the problem clearly. Again, we all have the best algorithm. We all have the best software. We all have the best everything. But then there are 250 other people who also have the best ideas. And then of those, NSF may fund 20. So just remember, when you are submitting a proposal, you're the best and everyone's the best. It's up to you whether you want to make your proposal clear so that somebody can understand your contribution. There's always the risk that someone understands it so well that they say this is not a good idea, but that's a problem you have no control over. Okay, the next thing is, I've already talked about the clarity of the proposed solution, but it's very important that you explain what you're doing. One thing I want to say is that in almost every paper and proposal I'm working on lately, if I don't see a figure at the beginning of the paper or a proposal, I usually say it's a bad document because people are visual. They don't want to read 2 pages of text without understanding the concepts of your paper or proposal. So whenever possible, have some kind of visual. It could be an overall architecture, it could be a vision, whatever. It could even be just a cool picture, but make sure that you have something for people to get a visual understanding of what you're trying to do. I would not have said that 25 years ago, but there's something you learn after failing at proposals, and you learn to make your ideas more clear. So when you do a proposal solution, have some kind of visuals to accompany that. A big thing is not having any way of benchmarking success. So almost all of the major funding agencies, and NSF especially, is looking for an evaluation plan of some kind in your document. So if you don't have a clear way of understanding success, and sometimes even involving outside evaluators. I'm going to give you an example really quickly of this. If you say, I'm going to train 25 undergraduate students to do something, and you have no criteria for the success, NSF is not going to believe you, okay? Because they've heard it before. They know that everybody talks about funding students, and then the professors sometimes run off and let the students just play video games, okay? So it's very important that you have some way of actually ensuring that you're going to be successful in your research plan. This track record thing is important because it's almost like a chicken and the egg problem. Proposals generally need to follow papers. And then many people think, well, how am I going to get my first funding if I haven't been funded to do research and write a paper? So one of the things that's really important, especially for new students or PhD students, is you're writing that paper with the hope that you build a track record for something in the future. And it may take years before you get your first grant. One of my first grants was on something related to open source computing. It was $1 million grant from NSF, in fact. And it was based on the fact that I had written a book on open source computing, not on any paper I wrote. So just to give you an example of track record is important. This is another thing, there's a delicate balance between writing for experts and non-experts. You want to make sure that your text is highly readable, but like Abhinav was saying, if there's no technical content, it's very unlikely any proposal will get funded by especially a serious foundation or a serious agency. So you focus on readability in the introduction, but when you get to the technical details, you better have something interesting to say that the experts are going to like. So you have to be kind of a crowd pleaser. You have to deal with people on panels who are not experts, and you have to, because there are going to be at least 1 or 2 panelists who don't really know what you're talking about. And then you need to make sure that your proposal is readable by the experts as well.
Thank you. Any
Hope
questions?
that helped.
Okay, so in our field, we usually go after something called science, computer, and information science and engineering. If you go to their website, I'm using NSF, National Science Foundation, as an example. As I said earlier, there are many, many sources of funding. You can look at, they list all their programs. They also list when the proposals due. If your proposal is due next week, don't bother, you have no chance, so don't even try. If you have not started. So there are many, many examples. So this is an example of a proposal, a program. The due date was earlier in the summer. It's called the Fairness in Artificial Intelligence in collaboration with Amazon. You can go to read the proposal and see what they are looking for. For National Science Foundation, every solicitation will list the program director. And as I said earlier, you are welcome to contact program director and know what they are looking for. This is something most students will have a tremendous difficulty to understand. You need to finish your proposal a month before the deadline. Why? Because they are writing a proposal is a huge amount of work. There will be just so many other things you need to worry about. You want to make sure your collaborators are okay with the proposal you write. You want to make sure they know what you want to propose, and they will do what you say they are going to do. If you don't give it time, later on, even if the worst thing you want to, if you get the money and you cannot deliver, your collaborators say, I'm not going to do that, then you'll be in big trouble. Your accountant have to check out all the numbers and make sure you allocate enough money to do what you want to do. In some cases, the lawyers may need to check off. And if you have, let's say we work with Argonne, national lab, maybe the director of our national lab need to say, yes, we are going to allow them to use the machines. And people need time to write this what's called support letter. Depends on the funding sources. Sometimes they will say, we'll give you 80% of money, you have to come out the other 20%. You need time to find out 20% of money. Otherwise, you are not going to get the 80% of money. If you don't have a proposal to start with, nobody's going to give you the 20% of the money. So you have to have a proposal at least almost ready so that you can go around. For example, you can go to your dean and say, can you find out 20% of money so I can get the other 80% money? If you finish the proposal 2 days before the submission date, don't even bother. Your proposal has no chance. Don't even bother. You just waste your time. And make sure you understand there's no partial credit. If your proposal is pretty good, it's a waste of time because you don't get the money. You have to exceed that threshold. Anything below the threshold is just nothing. So you need to throw away your student thinking, my proposal is pretty good, not really good, but that's a waste of time. Okay, George, this is yours.
Okay. 1 second. Okay, good. Yeah, I just want to make sure I wasn't muted. Yeah, so actually, I'm sorry. I probably shouldn't have talked about some of these things earlier, but it's okay. Sometimes repetition is good. I just remembered I had actually written details about this because I noticed it was missing. So my experience is panelists are busy. They have way too much to do. Doesn't that sound like the rest of us, though? Well, it's actually true, but what happens is panelists, the way that it has worked in the past for me is usually about 2 weeks before the panel meeting, they say, okay, dear panelists, we're so happy to have you on the panel. Even though we received these proposals months ago, we're only giving them to you 2 weeks before the panel meeting. So we have to read typically about 10 proposals in the 2 weeks that we have leading up to a panel. And the incredible irony of this is that, of course, all of us usually have full-time jobs being professors and researchers. So we have to just do this typically when we're like in the evenings or maybe on the plane flight over to NSF. So it's a very quick reading experience. So you're looking for certain things, and it starts with the executive summary. Does the summary have any meaning whatsoever? And is it worth even reading the rest of the proposal? Okay, so if the summary is not well written, it's probably not going to make it go anywhere with NSF panels. The big thing that I did point out earlier is there's like high variance in terms of the actual degrees of expertise in the research areas that you might be proposing. Keep in mind that solicitations tend to attract a wide variety of disciplines, even sub-disciplines within the discipline. Is very common. Like you might think computer science is this homogeneous thing. It's not. There are many sub-disciplines, and you might have somebody who's a security researcher, an HPC researcher, a software engineering researcher, and they clearly cannot read proposals in all of those areas. So what happens is that there's usually a triage process where the program officer is in front of the panelists saying, you know, which proposals do we think are in play? And that will be based on the ratings that were assigned initially by the panelists. Okay, and the ones that are not in play are probably not going to get discussed further. So if you get like a proposal that has a bunch of poor ratings or fair and poor ratings, very rarely is that going to be getting much attention during the panel meeting. So as I mentioned, the summary is read before reading the rest of the proposal. I can tell you I've been on panels where some people I don't think really read the proposal until the discussion started happening. They just looked at it and said, this is a bad proposal. I was one panel where the person said it's bad, and I said, did you read it? And I actually called them out on it, okay? So keep in mind that people are very busy. They sometimes just don't have the time. So it's your job to make sure that you write in such a way that at least they're going to read the first 2 pages, okay? And the conclusions. The other thing is, this is a really sad thing to say, but you need to understand it. If you go into this exercise thinking that, you know, a lot of proposals get funded, the reality is a panel meeting typically discusses about 20 to 30 proposals. And that means maybe like a few of them come out of the panel for actual funding recommendations, but it's usually like 1 or 2 in my experience. Okay, I have a typo here. It should say if a panel rates 30, 1 might be in play. So you have to write it for experts and non-experts. And if you don't do both of those successfully, it's almost always the case that you're going to get fairly poor reviews. And like I said, for those of us who have been doing it, we try our best, but we sometimes get poor reviews even when we do write the proposal. It happens to everyone. Okay, I'm actually glad Caleb and Abhinav got to do this because they get to see like how hard it is. Even when you do a good job, it can be very difficult to get funding. Okay, all right. I hope that was helpful.
Yeah, thank you. I'm going to spend maybe 1 or 2 minutes talking about budget. This is something, again, students are not, don't usually think about what resources you need. Here is an example of how you may spend money. So they have different categories. Category A is basically professors. In this case, there's only one, my name. Sometimes we have multiple professors. And category B will be like postdoc, graduate students, undergraduate students. Then we also have something called a fringe benefit. Basically, for professors, the university will pay certain amount of like a retirement account and so on. So Abhinav mentioned that the graduate student is pretty expensive. So let me calculate for you. Suppose you receive $2,500 a month as a salary. That's not even very high salary compared to industry. It's fortunately in West Africa, our living expense is low. So that's $30,000 a year. In addition, the research grant need to pay your tuition and the fee. That's approximately $15,000 a year. That's already a huge discount because in Purdue, if you are supported by a research grant, Purdue only charge the in-state tuition. So in a sense, the university already subsidized your research, right? If you are out-of-state student, you pay more than twice that amount. Then you also have a benefit from the university. Then most students do not understand there's something called indirect cost. That's what the university will charge additionally for water, for electricity, for furniture, for building, and so on. So you add the 30,000 plus 15,000 plus 2,000, that's $47,000. And then you add the 15.5%, that's the Purdue's indirect cost rate. For one PhD student, we need to get $73,000 a year to do the research. This 55% depends on the funding agencies. Some of the funding agencies or some of the sponsors will say, we will only give 20%. Some of them will say 0%. Purdue obviously doesn't like 0% because that means somebody has to pay for the building, somebody has to pay the furniture, and university is paying for it, but university doesn't get the money. But this gives you an idea. A graduate student, if you get money from National Science Foundation, it will cost $73,000 a year. So that gives you an idea. This does not even include machines, GPUs, does not include you go to a conference, and depends on your publication. In some places, let's say you publish a journal paper, the journal paper may say you need to pay $1,000. There are a lot of other expenses. So we usually say a rule of thumb for graduate student is about $100,000 a year after you add all the other things together. That's an approximation for research. So that give you an idea what kind of research money you need. This is the rest of the budget table. You can see we may have equipment. Let's say you want to buy some expensive machines, or you may go to conference, go to travel, and you may have, let's say, publication costs in G2. You may hire a consultant. You may pay cloud computing in G4, and so on. Actually, if you think about it, our research is still relatively cheap because computers are cheap. Some other research field, they easily need to spend millions of dollars just to buy the equipment or buy parts. So even though we do say it's pretty expensive, but compared to many other research topics, we are still relatively cheap. In the next few slides, I'm going to just give you a bit glance what the proposal may look like. This depends on the solicitation. Some of them will give you very clear description, say your page 1 has to talk about this, your page 2 has to talk about that. Depends on the solicitation. Some of them are very precise. Some of them will give you a lot of freedom what you want to talk about. And all the sections together for a proposal for National Science Foundation, usually a proposal put together is more than 60 pages. I have one proposal put together is 200 pages because we have a big team. You can see we have to put biography there. We have a very complex budget. We have a lot of facility. We have different computing facility and so on. So I have put together a proposal of 200 pages. The next few slides I want to say is you really need to think about how to make good figures. Many students will just keep writing text and people are not going to read a lot of text. They have to look at figures. So this is an example of a proposal used to support Chem 2. We have a block diagram showing what we do. We'll have a data source, we'll create configuration, we'll upload program. People from this can get a very quick understanding of the major component of this project. So we need to deal with data, we need to deal with analysis, we need to deal with storage and computing. This is an example of a proposal when we refer to our previous paper. So you can see there's citation 12 and 13 here. We say we have done the work and this is our result. We can also have a table showing how this work is different from other work. So we cite different proposal, different project, and we say we check mark all of them, and the other existing work do not check mark all of them. This is another example. We explain to people how we evaluate energy efficiency. We actually have a measurement, and figure B shows our measurement result from existing work. So again, this is an example showing how you can use figure to convey the concept that you have done good amount of work and you have the data to support you want to do this research project. I think this is the last slide. How to improve the chance of success. First, you want to propose things you want to do. A common mistake among many people is they look at what the funding agencies want to do and they propose things to meet the funding agency. That's a mistake, because if you do that, very soon you have a lot of proposals, you have a lot of projects, even if you are successful, you have a lot of projects that are not related. And very soon you have just too many unrelated projects and you cannot be successful that way. You have to have a core expertise and everything you do should build around that expertise so that you don't have to have 5 different projects working on 5 different topics. You may have a 5 projects, but they all work on related things. That way you don't have to change all the time. Very often you need to do research and get some result before you write a proposal. The Chem 2 project, the proposal was submitted in 2015. It was successful the first time it was submitted. But the Chem 2, we started building Chem 2 from 2012. By the time we submit a proposal, we already have a substantial amount of work done. We have a web page running. We already have several papers. That's one of the reasons the proposal was successful. I already mentioned you should write papers to give the evidence you know what you're doing and you can demonstrate you have a capability to do this. Very often you need to talk to the people in charge of the program to understand what they're looking for. Typically they will not say what they want, but they will tell you what they don't want. And that's also helpful because if you do something they don't want, you're just wasting time. They just look at it and say, nah, that's not what we want, and they just throw it away. So understanding what they don't want is also very helpful. Work with the winners. You look at who has been successful in this area and try to build a team with them. Start early. I already said, National Science Foundation has an internal rule. They will give people at least 90 days to write a proposal. Means when they have a program announced, the due date is at least 90 days later. That's their internal rule. You want to start your proposal early, finish the draft early so you can ask people to review and critique. I have multiple proposals. I finished a month before the deadline. I send the proposal to many people and I ask them, tell me what's wrong with this proposal. And I get very, very helpful feedback. I have done that a few times. Every time I did that, the proposal got selected. So when I do that, I have a very good success rate. And just in case you don't get successful, don't be frustrated. This is a process you have to keep improving. If you go back to the first point, if you do the project you want to do, that's the first question I asked at the beginning. Then you will keep doing it until you're successful. That's the last slide I have, and I'm going to post here for question and discussion. Anyone has questions or comments?
I actually do have one quick comment. I meant to bring this up, but I forgot, but then Professor Thiruvathukal mentioned it. And I think this is important, is another reason why you do a proposal is you see just how much work it is. This money doesn't come easily. It seems like professors have lots of money, but it does not come easily. It does not come easily at all. So it's a good way for you to kind of get that experience under your belt and be like, oh, okay, now I have perspective on how we get money.
Right.
Anyone else?
Some of the best researchers don't get money. I mean, we're lucky that we've had. I always say that I'm lucky to have had the success I've had. I know Yung-Hsiang probably feels the same way, but we don't. It's not guaranteed to get funding. You may have some really great ideas, and it can be really hard to get them funded. You know, and that's why. One thing I really like that we do in our research group is we keep our focus on getting results, and we keep publishing. Like we just did that really nice COVID-19 paper, which Caleb and Abhinav were both involved in. You know, we keep on working, okay, because we know that one day maybe, I mean, this morning Isha and I participated in an interview with a publication about a major magazine, in fact, based in Europe. So we have to keep working. That's really the key thing that I wanted to say as a last bullet point on Yung-Hsiang's very last slide is if we keep working, and if we keep working on the right kinds of problems, I think that some success will follow. And we obviously want to improve our success, and that's why we're really giving students even more opportunities. And it's really paying off for the group because we're publishing more, we're submitting proposals, and I think that this is going to be a good year for the research group. So, I mean, I really just wanted to end on a very positive note that the whole idea of this presentation is we want to improve our success because we have such a great team, and I share these ideas with other researchers I'm talking to because a lot of these resources we're developing, I think, can be helpful to many other people. But really great to get the student perspective in this presentation this time around.
So let's open up to see what anyone has any questions. Jack or Jacob or Mohammed or Shane or Vishal and Chibozo. Anybody want to say anything? I hope this give you some useful information.
Yeah, this was a really, really helpful presentation. It's always something that's kind of like abstracted when you're an undergraduate and something that you don't really get to see a whole lot of. So actually having it all laid out was really helpful. Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Shane.
Anyone else want to say anything? We hope this gives you a starting point to think. There are obviously a lot of things after this. How do you actually write a proposal? That's yet another topic, but we hope to give you a starting point for you to think about opportunities in your life. As I mentioned at the beginning, it's not just writing proposal, it's the way of thinking how to build your own life, because we want to give the option, knowledge that you may actually choose what you want to do and get the resources to do what you want to do. Anyone else want to say anything? Well, if there's none, then I want to thank everybody for your time.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Enjoy your evening.
Thanks for coming, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, for being here. Don't hesitate to contact